So it's time to get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me for this Scrum webinar. I'm super excited that you have showed up again for another webinar. If this is your first time here, I'll just let you know in a few seconds how it works. If you have been here before, thank you again for joining me for this one. So in order to get started, I'm just gonna quickly go over how this webinar works and what we are talking about, what we're gonna do. So in the first part of the webinar, I'm just gonna try to address the things that you should consider doing after passing the exam. Now, regardless if you take the PSM I exam or the PSPO I exam, it really doesn't matter. Many of you have some questions regarding like, what are the next steps? And in the second part of the webinar, I'm gonna get questions from you. And this is actually the most interesting part because you will have the opportunity of joining live, turning on your microphone, asking a question, starting a discussion. So that's super, super important to be able to understand and to communicate on this one to see how things go. Now, regarding the Q&A section, if you have a question at any time, just raise your hand. You can do this from the interface so that I know that you want to ask a question. So this is what's happening. Many students pass the exam and start wondering, what should I do next? What's the next step? What is the next certification I should take? Or generally, what should I do? Maybe I want to get a job as a Scrum Master. Maybe I want to get a job as a product owner or for any other Scrum related position. And the reality is, there is no one path. There is no one direct way because you guys are also quite different. For example, what works for me may not work for you. What works from somebody in India may not work from somebody in the US. So there are many differences. And also, there are different organizations, different companies, different people. So there's not one way, there's no one path. You did this, the next step is to do that. But still, I think the most important thing is looking into how you can practice Scrum, how you can get some real Scrum experience. So the first step is to get a job. So if you're currently unemployed, or if you're currently in a company that doesn't do anything with Scrum, or in a position that has absolutely nothing to do with Scrum, you should maybe look into getting a job that has something to do with Scrum. And I'll get back to that a bit later, how would I approach it. But this would be an idea. If you want to practice Scrum and the current position doesn't offer you this opportunity, then you should somehow get a job so that you can get that practical experience. The best situation is if you're finding yourself in an organization, in a company that already does Scrum, but yourself are not in a position where you're actually doing something with Scrum. And what you can do is to go to your management, go to your boss, go to when you have a meeting with someone that is in a management position to tell them about, hey, I'm really interested in Scrum. Are there any openings for a Scrum Master role or a product owner role? Or, can I learn from somebody within the organization? Or I'm really interested in learning more about this. Is there any way I can get some practical experience? And because you're already in an organization, you have a much higher chance of earning that trust that is required to get a new position than if you were external to that company and would apply for a job. Because generally speaking, many positions in almost any organization do require some experience. Now, of course, this is like a chicken and an egg problem because, to get a job, you need experience, but without a job, you don't have that experience. So there's no way to get experience without getting a job. So typically, looking within the organization that you're currently in can really help you get that experience. Even if it's just a little bit, you can still help you on your resume with something like, hey, I've been Scrum Master for 1 year. I'm just getting started, but I have some practical experience. Understand how things are going. Now, this part with the exam itself, it's of course good to know the basics, but it's also good to understand how Scrum is applied in real life scenarios. And if you're in the case that, maybe you're already a Scrum Master, maybe you have 3 or 4 years of experience and, decided to also get certified. That is good as well. At the same time, when you're taking the exam or when you're learning Scrum from the Scrum Guide and from my courses, you may notice that what you're doing in your organization is not really like 100% how it says in the guide. And especially if you're a few years into this, you may notice that some things are a bit different. And what you can also do is to really reflect about what you have learned and how are things applied in your organization. And generally, to take that servant leadership role that typically the Scrum Master has, and to look into, let's why are we doing some things like this? How can you improve what you are doing so that you can get more value? And try to understand and to bring others along with you. Or if your organization is not doing Scrum yet, you can be the person that really helps your organization adopt the agile principles, the agile values, the Scrum values. So, and start implementing Scrum in projects. So you can be that person. So in essence, there are many ways to practice Scrum, and it all starts with getting a job, putting yourself in a position where you do something related to Scrum, continuously improving what you're doing, and trying to align what you're trying to do with what is being said in the Scrum Guide, what are the Scrum values, and to make it a win-win situation, both for the organization where you're working, but also for you to gain practical experience. As I mentioned in the beginning, if you're searching for a new job, the requirements for getting that job may be quite different depending on where you are located. What I typically recommend is using a job search engine like Indeed, for example, to search for jobs in the location where you are or where you're interested in moving or anything like that. So if you start searching for Scrum Master jobs, this can really help you understand like what are the requirements. For example, you may notice that some organizations would prefer that you have a PSM II certification. So, you may want to look into that as well. Or they may require that you have other certifications that are not from scrum.org. So it's definitely an idea to look into that as well. Or generally, what are the next steps? How can I get a job if I'm currently not employed? So if, that company or that organization is not so strict in regards to your experience, maybe you can invest in more trainings, more certifications. So typically doing some research on your own can really help a lot. And as I said, things can be really related to the location where you are. So in a nutshell, you have to do research. I cannot tell you, you should take the PSM II exam, or you should do that, or you should look into SAFe or anything else. It really depends on your current situation, your current location, and the position that you're interested in. The same goes if you're on LinkedIn. You can also find job listings there. And you will also have what are the requirements, but also what are the nice to haves. And you might also notice other certifications or other ideas that are related to the position that you are interested in. So maybe even if you're not interested in getting a job right now, maybe you want to get a job in 6 months, or maybe you're thinking about, altogether leaving the current organization and going for a new organization, you can use this research to plan your own path to understand, okay, I researched these 2 or 3 large organizations for Scrum Master positions, and it seems that all of them tend to prefer having a PSM II certification for whatever reason. In that case, you may want to, think about Well, it seems that PSM II is a good idea. It seems that all these jobs require it, or seems to prefer having it. So I should invest some time into this. But also, there might be other certifications or other trainings that you can take that will be valuable for this organization that you're trying to apply. So do look into that as well. Don't just limit yourself with a fixed idea. Do as much as research as possible and try to understand what are the best steps for you in your situation. Also, in terms of if you're like super specific on what is the next certification I should do, the same idea applies. So I cannot tell you which certification you should do because I don't know in which direction you are going. So this is, again, something that you need to answer for yourself. So you need to do, again, some research. Now, one idea that I recommend is that, again, you go on LinkedIn, and if you're interested in a specific organization, or you have noticed that they are hiring product owners or scrum masters, you may want to do some, I call it digital electronic stalking. You want to look at some of these profiles that people inside that organization have. And you can take a look at what kind of certifications do these persons that have this position that I'm interested in have. They all have PSM II. So apparently for this company, it may be interesting to have the PSM II certification. Or maybe they have some certifications from, the Project Management Institute. So you may want to look into that as well. But additionally, what you can also do is that you can get in touch with people. You can even find that if you are somehow connected, or you can send a connection request. And the most important thing is that you can ask for advice. So typically people, if you're like totally honest, especially if the organization is a bit larger, you can message someone and simply say, hey, look, I don't know, I just finished university, or I'm changing jobs. I'm super interested in this Scrum Agile thing, and I'm really interested in like, what should I do to get a position in this organization as a Scrum Master? I noticed that you have, I don't know, so many years of experience, you have all the certifications. I only have the PSM I certification. Do you think I have a chance, or do you recommend me to take any other certification that's valued in the organization? And that person, even if this person has like lots of certification, will definitely not have like, let's say in 6 months time to do 6 exams or something like this, may tell you, look, this PMI, PMP exams or anything else, they're not so valuable here. And even, PSM II is not so valuable. They really are interested that you, I don't know, you have a technical know-how, or you have a technical background, or whatever else may be relevant for that organization. So it can be really valuable to get advice from somebody within the organization. So that's the general approach that I will take in this case. So this was the first part of the webinar. Of course, if you have any questions about this, do raise your hand. And if you have any Scrum related questions, raise your hand, and I'm gonna take a 2-minute break. And after that, I'm gonna look over the questions. We're gonna start with the people who have raised their hand and gonna start a conversation, because this is what a webinar is about. It's not only about hearing what I have to say, but also hearing your questions. So we'll be back in a bit. Okay, so it's time to get started with your questions. And if that's all right, I'm gonna start with Joydeep. I don't know if that's correct. Please don't hate me if I mispronounce your name.
Yeah,
Can you hear
hi
me?
Valentin. This is Joydeep.
Hi, Joydeep. How are you?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
Very good. Tell me, where are you calling from, and what is
I am
your
from India. Okay.
and what?
So I was having a question.
Yes,
Yes, tell
please.
me. You carry on. You first complete your part.
No, I just wanted to ask you, like, what is your current position? Which exam are you preparing for? And generally, what are your next steps after passing the exam? Just to share a bit, what are your thoughts, and in relation to what I presented
Definitely.
before?
Definitely. So basically, I am working from India. This is a product-based company. Currently, I'm holding a position for quality control supervisor, and I'm with this company for the last 3 years. So I've recently taken your course, this PSM one. I got references from LinkedIn from various persons like Punesh Doshi. Various persons referred your course. So I've just started taking a preparation test for your exams as well. I mean, this for your course as well. So my question to you was like, I do not have any product background. Like for the last 3 years, I'm working into operations and quality control departments. So I was very keen to get into the product domain. So our company, whatever job description gets released, they mention we need 3 to 4 years experience in product domain and etc. etc. So I was just keen whether this PSM one certification or PSPO one certification will really help me to get into any kind of product domain. I mean, that was my concern.
Mhm. Okay, so the reality, even if the certifications have a very fancy name like professional Scrum Master, professional Scrum product owner, they really do not compensate for practical experience. What the certifications show is that you understand how Scrum is supposed to work, like what are the rules, how are the events supposed to be ordered, and generally a lot of things that in reality some organizations do wrong. So the focus of the exam is not to provide you some kind of like an idea how to do this particular job, but like to explain the rules. If I can make like an analogy to sports, it's like when you're watching sports, if this is for example soccer, you you don't become a soccer player just by attending a course or by passing a certification. It's just like you know the rules. There are two gates, one ball, 11 players. There's like 90 minutes in total. So this is sort of like the kind of information that you are getting from these exams and this preparation. They alone are valuable, but typically most of the time they're not enough to give you like this practical experience. So in your case, I'm a bit surprised that your organization, like even for internal position, they have so many requirements. What happens in many countries?
Not actually,
Yes.
Valentine. So they do not have any requirement for internal job switches. So whatever description I have just mentioned, it's like for the external hiring. So they do
Okay.
not disclose the JD for the internal hirings. So
Hmm.
might not, but I was thinking there will be certain like internal job postings as well. So that's the reason I was preparing for this. So
Hmm.
that's why I just wanted to just get it clear. I mean, as you have so much of experience like with different domains, so I thought it might be handy for me to get an understanding how this course will help me, or yeah, how this
Yeah.
certification will help.
No, I think it will definitely help you in the sense that you have shown like being interested, not just saying, "Hey, I'm interested in this Scrum. Give me a chance." It's like, no, I'm interested in the Scrum thing. Now I passed the certification, which is recognized one of the, if not the best, one of the most recognized certifications in terms of a Scrum Master or the product owner position. And you showed that you are willing to invest some time into understanding what this is about. And the only thing that you need is a chance, is trying to somebody to give you a chance, or when it's an opening in a specific project, even if it's like super small, or even if you're getting help from someone else that is maybe very busy, doesn't have a lot of time, and can delegate some things to you to get that product experience, to understand how things actually work, then it's definitely worth it, because you are willing to do the job. You're willing to put the effort into doing this. And organizations, most of the time, they have really issues finding qualified people. So especially if you have experience in an organization, most of the time it's much easier for any organization, for typically any position, to hire internally first, because you already know how things work. Like 90% of the things, you don't have to relearn some things, even if it's like a different product, even if it's a different section of the organization. You still have like an overview how things are done. So that is much more valuable than going with someone external, going for someone uh, external where you don't have like exact references, because inside anybody can ask and talk with your current supervisor or current boss and ask, hey, how is your deep doing with this job? Do you think I should, can I trust them to do a proper job? Can I trust them to lead this project, or be a product owner or a scrum master, or help me out with a few things in terms of managing this product. And can easily get that feedback. Okay, that's the way I'm looking at it.
Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you so much, Vali.
you're more than welcome. So we also have Valdemar.
Yes, I'm on air right now, I think. Do you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi. Where are you coming from?
I'm from Warsaw, Poland.
Okay.
At first, thank you very much for investing your time in organizing such webinars, and thank you for responding to my questions on Udemy yesterday. That's really worthy to me.
You're more than welcome.
And I would like to ask you for one thing, real life example from this week. What do you think about going beyond the rules of Scrum Guide? I mean, Scrum Guide does not refer to remote work, in which we are all in my company since March this year, and we decided with this development team this week to lengthen this daily meeting to 30 minutes, where also product owner is present. What do you think about changing the time box from the Scrum Guide?
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to return the question to you. How do you feel about it, based on what you have seen in the course and read in the Scrum Guide?
You know, I was the one who convinced the team to make the change, because I think the productivity is in the core of our work. So if we really feel that we need the change, we need 15 minutes more to better understand ourselves, and it's better than taking 10 or 20 questions on Microsoft Teams during the day. I think it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to know what is the professional opinion.
Okay, now that's definitely a lot of teams that decide to like change a bit the Scrum framework, change a bit the rule, bend the rules, to put it like that. Most of the time they have like a valid reason why that respective rule doesn't apply to them, or why that respective rule is too restrictive. Maybe you have a team where you have like 9 developers or something like that, or something. There is a context that makes it really hard to adapt something. Now, in terms of the Scrum rules, they are very clear, and what I want you to point out is the fact that the Scrum framework is a framework. It's not like a complete guide on how to do Scrum. And of course, it doesn't contain anything that is related to remote teams, or doesn't contain anything else to maybe partially remote teams or anything like that. Because what the Scrum framework is trying to do is to explain what are the mandatory events that need to happen. And additionally, just a second. And additionally, also, what are the rules surrounding that events. And in that case, with the daily Scrum, it's also important to understand like what is the purpose of the meeting. And even in the Scrum Guide, if you look closely, it says that of course it is a 15-minute meeting. And that is important because the meeting needs to be very effective and must have a purpose in mind. And the development team can structure this meeting to fit specific needs. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that the development team cannot have any other meetings during the day. So combining multiple purposes into a single meeting and extending the deadline, the time frame of that respective meeting is against the Scrum rules, because you have to ask yourself, like, what is the purpose of the meeting? Is just one meeting to get everyone together and to get into detailed discussions? Because 30 minutes sounds to go much beyond the purpose of the daily scrum. So in those 15 minutes, it should be like a very quick sync meeting for the development team. Even the product owner, if the development team agrees, can be present, but is not actively participating in the meeting. And the idea is to keep the meeting as short as possible, to understand how are things moving towards the sprint goal, if there are any impediments, and generally, what's the current status, to have everyone at the same time exchange what's going on. So keeping this short is really important, because everyone will be super focused on the outcome of the meeting. Now, even the Scrum Guide mentions that it's not forbidden for the development team to meet after this meeting to have more detailed discussions. And this can happen like right after the meeting. So as soon as the goal of the meeting has been met, maybe in that respective meeting, you can identify, like, it seems that somebody is having a problem, or we need to make a quick decision. So that can be extracted from the meeting itself. And you can have a meeting right after the daily scrum in which maybe not everyone needs to attend. So if, for example, you have a development team of 8 people and only 3 are kind of working on a problem, then the other ones can use that time to do something else. So only the people that are affected by a specific thing or can contribute to this can meet afterwards and have a discussion. So it's no purpose in having 15 minutes of working time multiplied by, let's say, 5 developers. That also adds up to a certain amount of time and productivity. So this is how I would look at it. Every rule that is in the Scrum Guide is there for a specific reason and is important to be respected and understood. So I hope this kind of like gives you an idea of why it is important to look back at the Scrum Guide, why it's important to understand what's happening there, to try to apply things, let's say, by the book, and not to make adaptations through this process, because the framework doesn't really impose a lot of things. It's not so much to ask to have a 15-minute meeting. Okay, so hopefully I managed to respond to this. I'm gonna take a question from the chat quickly. So the question is, I've been a Scrum Master. How much time do I need to prepare before attempting to write the exam? Most of the time, having Scrum Master experience and attempting the PSM I exam may not be a benefit. And the reason for that is there are a lot of things and adaptations, as the one we discussed before, like, oh, the product owner attends and the meeting is longer than 15 minutes and so on. So there are many things that happen in an organization. You may join as a Scrum Master and you may be accustomed to breaking the rules or making false assumptions about how things, events, rules work. And, even if you are a Scrum Master, but even if you're not, the learning path is more or less the same. Most of the time, I say it's harder if you have experience, because in that case, what happens is that you will start thinking and putting yourself in different situations. And in the exam itself, the exam is really not asking, doesn't care about your opinions on how to solve specific problems, doesn't care about your experience in solving specific problems. And the only thing that the exam actually cares about is you understanding the contents of the Scrum Guide. So if you understand the contents of the Scrum Guide and you can apply it in different situations, past experience is most of the time not to your benefit. You always need to think back, not what you think about this, you need to think about what's being said in the Scrum Guide. So hopefully with that, I managed to answer that question. And we're gonna take Avinash. Let's see if that works.
Yes, Valentin, Avinash here from India.
Hi.
So, hello.
Thank
I
you for
work for
joining.
a French bank. Yeah, thank you, and thank you for taking your time. So, I work for a French bank, Society General, So currently I'm working as a business analyst. So I have a couple of questions with regard to the Scrum Master. The first question is, what is the difference between a PSM and a CSM, that is a professional Scrum Master and a certified Scrum Master? And my second question will be like, does a Scrum Master does require any IT domain knowledge?
Okay.
So these
Great.
are my two questions.
Great questions. So I'm going to start with the last one. The Scrum Master doesn't have really like a specific job description, at least in terms of the Scrum Master role, in terms of Scrum. So it doesn't have to be a technical person. Most of the time you have the Scrum Master as being also a technical person for very technical products, but also a people person. So in some regards, yes, it depending on the organization, it's good to have like a technical understanding, because most of the time the Scrum Master will be in the position to resolve impediments or look into the organization for organizational impediments. And in that case, of course, the Scrum Master doesn't have to be like a developer or have like a deep understanding, but typically it does help to understand how things go in terms of, we're building this product. What are the technical difficulties? Why is this company, not so agile? Why are there so many hurdles in the process of really allowing the development team to do more in less time and such? So from that point of view, it does help a lot for the product owner, but this is not, strictly speaking, a requirement that you find in the Scrum Guide. In itself, the role itself doesn't contain that. You will find, if you're following my advice and looking for job descriptions for a Scrum Master position, you may find requirements. Hey, you need to have a technical background in the financial industry and so on. So you cannot just take one person from one company. Oh, you've been a Scrum Master, perfect. Okay, come on here, and you can just start working immediately. Every organization is different. There are different requirements. Unfortunately, some organizations do not see the value in having a so-called full-time Scrum Master and decide to combine the Scrum Master role with other activities as well, because they unfortunately sometimes do not understand what the Scrum Master does all day. And from that perspective, it makes it even harder or even more technical as a position, or it's not even a position. The Scrum Master is the role. That particular position in the company can be called differently, but most of the time, sometimes you'll find the position is also called Scrum Master. Regarding your other question, the differences between PSM and CSM, I don't have the CSM certification, but from the research I did, to put everything super quick, the CSM certification is just as good as the PSM certification. The difference lies in the fact that you need to attend a course, and that course needs to be from Scrum Alliance. And such a course will cost you about $1,000. So depending on who's paying for that course, well, you may need to think about it. So if the organization is paying for the course, okay, great. If you're paying out of your pocket for that specific course, a PSM will definitely be much more affordable and just as well recognized. Don't quote me on this one, but I think you also need to renew that certification after 2 or 3 years. So it's not as the PSM certification, it's valid for life. The CSM certification needs a renewal. But just to say one positive thing about this, as far as I know, the CSM exam is much easier than the PSM exam. But you also, you need to balance the financials, figure out who's paying for what. So hopefully that answers your question in terms of these two certifications. Okay, I'll get some questions from the chat. And I would really, really love if you guys could raise your hand and ask another question, start here a conversation. There's so many of you here attending this, so it would be super great. If you have any, it doesn't really have to be related to what we've been talking earlier, like getting a job. You can simply ask any Scrum-related questions. I know many of you are probably preparing for the exam. So if there are like any aspects from the Scrum guide or anything like that that is still unclear, or you're not, don't be afraid to ask. I'm really here to help. Let's clarify anything. Let's clarify any doubts, any questions that you found that are confusing you, or any aspects. Just raise your hand and let's have a conversation here. That's super important. Until somebody will raise his or her hand, I will quickly go over the chat and take a look at what's going on here. So I think one of the questions was, what's the study plan for PSM II and PSPO II? Okay, so for PSM II, I'm actually currently working at creating a course, and I will let you know when that's done. And as soon as the PSM II course is ready, I will start also working on the PSPO II. In a nutshell, there's not a lot of, so practically there's no new content for the PSM II exam or the PSPO II. The Scrum guide is still at the core of the exam, and that's super important to understand. It's just a thing, the exam is much more complicated, much more, the questions that are being asked there really go into testing if you really understood Scrum. They don't just test like super easy things where you can easily notice, oh, that answer is definitely wrong, that is wrong, and you remain most of the time with like the correct answers. In these exams, the level is much higher. So I will let you know when I have a course on this topic. Otherwise, the study plan is really to study the Scrum guide, and ideally also to look into some books that take a bit more into depth, explaining some concepts. But unfortunately, a lot of books out there are not really very specific in terms of addressing a specific exam. So that's the thing with that. Oh, I noticed that we have Marcus, so that is very much welcome. Hello, Marcus, can you hear me?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me too?
I can hear you. Hi, how are you?
Okay, fine. Oh, thank you very much for doing this webinar.
You're more than welcome.
I'm originally from Germany. I'm working now in the Netherlands for the government, where we apply model-based systems engineering projects, and we have a team working with Scrum. So
Okay.
I filled in the position of the product owner at first for, let's say, almost a year. And I did before a scrum-master courses. And
Great.
so that's a little bit about my background. And now I'm trying to make the certificate. And I read the book over the product owner. I did a lot of the assessment exams on the Scrum website with 100% in 2 minutes or something like that. And I still failed one time in the.
Okay, thank you for sharing this.
Yeah. So it is, I was a little bit disappointed, let's say it like that, because I missed it. I missed it at it was just 1 point that I missed the exam. So that's why I did more research, and now we are doing also a webinar, a 2-day webinar at a Scrum organization at the end of July with 2 other colleagues of my company, and I hope then we will get it. But the questions, they were so tricky, I would like to say, because there were some things about Nexus, for example, that I didn't really mention to be in that exam. So in between the exam, I just thought, what the heck is going on? I mean, that I didn't find that in that really specific book about the product owner, which is also from the Scrum company. So I
understand.
What recommendations do you have else than doing the webinar?
So the reality with the open assessments from scrum.org for almost any certification is that they do not really reflect the difficulty of the actual exam. And what that means is that you take those exams, you think, oh, I have 100%, especially the questions there tend to repeat a lot. So you do not get, if you attempt the open assessments a few times, you will not get a fresh set of questions. So you naturally, as a human being, you start memorizing answers and questions because you know it if you study them a bit. And as I mentioned, the level of difficulty is not the highest one. Now, I don't think the exam itself will actually include any Nexus questions because that is not really part of the curriculum for the exam. But the questions may have questions regarding like scalability. So you have multiple teams working on the same product. So those kind of questions can occur. But at the same time, they are indirectly covered in the Scrum guide. And also if you're taking the PSPO course, there's also a section like explaining the basics regarding scaling Scrum. Practically, there are only a few ideas that you need to know. It's not something super detailed. And also the exam questions that you find, the prep exam questions that you find inside the course, like kind of a test everything that you need to know, like the most important aspects and the most important ideas. And you're also given like the explanation, like what are the rules that you need to remember. For example, one product has one product backlog and one product owner. So it's not super hard to remember something like this. And if you are facing like with any scalability questions regarding Scrum, if you know like the basic rules and you can look at the answers, you find flaws into them, and then you can go back and eliminate that respective answers, and typically only the valid answers will remain. The thing with books is that even if they are recommended by scrum.org, if you're looking like for any of the exams, for any exam, you will find there a list of books that will keep you busy until you go need retirement. So and most of the time also the books that are there, they're general books. They're not really targeted specifically at like the things that you should know for the exam. There's a lot of content, but most of the time, not a lot of specific value. So I don't know how much you managed to go through the PSPO course, but what's happening in this course is that you're typically taken step by step through the process and pointed out like what are the most important things that you need to do. There's also some quizzes in between, and then you can go to the practice questions. And additionally, if you have the time, I also recommend at least watching one of the most recent webinars where I'm discussing exam tips and how to approach the exam. There's like the most updated information that can really give you some idea on how to approach the exam. And additionally, you mentioned that you'll be also taking another webinar. So it's probably very good for you that if you manage to go over my course once, and after that also take the webinar, will be like a good recap, or maybe from a slightly different perspective, try to understand how things work.
Thank you very much.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
Great.
you.
And if there's anything else, I'll be available in the Q&A section or through private messages. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have before attempting the exam. And I'm sure that this time will not be an issue passing it. And it's definitely a great thing that to see like public organizations that are really investing and looking into these agile methodologies and trying to do agile projects. That's super exciting, because most of the time many public institutions are way behind in terms of IT and in terms of many aspects. So it's a great thing that you are involved in such an organization, such projects.
That's really nice.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna have Samir as well.
Hi, Valentin. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Very well. Firstly, thank you so much for the guidance. I passed my PSM I exam last week with 97%.
Congratulations. That's a great score.
Thank you. I think I was looking at one of the questions, I guess from Ishika as well, that whether it is enough or not. So, I mean, my perspective is, your course is spot on in terms of the content, all the 3 tests, and I mean, Mikhail's, assessment as well is more than enough. And, you need to thoroughly understand the Scrum guide to, pass the examination. It is, you don't have to, refer anything else if you are, thorough with the concepts. So that is what my perspective is with respect to those.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, definitely agree in terms of the idea with questions. It generally shouldn't do like tons of questions. The purpose is not memorizing questions, memorizing answers. The purpose is for the questions to like trigger questions in your head, to point you in the right direction in terms of, look, I really didn't understand like what is the point of the retrospective, so maybe I should go back to the contents in the course, to the contents in the Scrum guide, and generally like to ask questions if anything is unclear.
Yeah, perfect. So, Valentin, I have one question. For the people who are not from the IT background, I think Avinash also mentioned the same thing. Is it, I mean, see, developers are working on different sort of technologies. Maybe someone must be working on Java, or someone maybe on Python. And for a Scrum Master to understand that all the technologies won't be possible. But again, it's something that is really expected, because when you are having a discussions with the developers, they might say that this particular SBI sprint backlog item might take 3 days. In fact, if you know about this thing, there might be a possibility that it can get completed within a day as well. So there is a chance that they might try to fool you with this kind of questions, or with suggestions. So how do you deal with those kind of problems if you don't know a particular technology?
Well, that's a great question. And I think the underlying aspect there, the Scrum is based on a set of values. And, like one of these, like, it's not mentioned directly, but one of the things that is definitely important is to have like this level of trust. So nobody is checking what anybody else does. Nobody is not trusting the other person to do his job, or not to give like a fair estimate or anything like that. So this is one of the foundations in Scrum. You need to have like this trust inside the Scrum team, and generally also within the organization, in order to move forward with actually applying Scrum. Because if there is no trust, then it really makes the relationship between the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the developer team to be a difficult relation. Because if especially the product owner, he or she needs to trust the development team that whatever they're saying is like to their best intentions. And if an estimate is realistic or not, that the developer team should always give like a realistic estimate, not to account for any problems, or to account for like maybe they feel they need more time. There should be like this openness in communication within the team. And this is typically the job of the Scrum Master, to make everyone comfortable being honest and sharing everything, and not seeing, for example, the product owner like in a management position and the development team in an inferior, like subordinate position, because this is not the main idea. Everyone is in the Scrum team, so they have the same goal to put it together. They're building this product together. So this is like the important thing that needs to be remembered. Now, indeed, it will be helpful for the Scrum Master to have an understanding of the technology, but not in the sense of verifying what the development does, not in the sense of like sharing opinions in the sense that, oh, I think this should take less. This is not the job of the Scrum Master. It can help in the sense of facilitating conversations, of like understanding a bit what are the pain points, because most of the time because the development team and the product owner are like different sides of the spectrum. One person is more, the product owner will have, it's very like more business oriented, and typically doesn't have like a lot of ideas about these technical things, which is also absolutely fine. We also have the development team that's super technical, and sometimes there's this disconnect with the business, like, oh, the business people don't understand nothing. This is hard things. You cannot easily move the button from left to right and so on. So in those situations, of course, the Scrum Master, if the Scrum Master has like an understanding also of the business side and also of the technical side, it can really help bring this group together. And as I mentioned previously, also in terms of impediments, especially if there are like some technical impediments, it does help to have discussions where you really understand what's going on, and you're not acting only like a moderator. Not in the sense, again, of pointing out who's right or who's wrong, but in the sense of like getting to the right people in order to get them to change something within the organization. So that's probably the most important takeaway. The Scrum Master is not a Scrum police, is not a mediator or like a judge who decides this person is right or this person is wrong. So from this point of view, the Scrum Master doesn't need to have like this advanced level of know-how in terms of knowing all the technologies. But as I mentioned, having an understanding of this helps a bit do this job better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so let's look at other questions as well. We have here Kamal.
Yeah, hi Valentin. This is Kamal from India.
Hi,
I come
Kamal.
from a technical background.
Okay.
And as I go through the course, I mean, I have a question with the content actually. These Scrum events, like the sprint planning, the retrospective, and the other event, they're time boxed. And I'm just wondering, like, I mean, is it mandatory that for example, for sprint planning, the meeting should be 8 hours back to back, or can it be split over the days? Because there is no gap between the sprints that is documented. But how about these meetings? I mean, 8 hours back to back, I don't think it's practical.
Yeah, so that's a very valid question, and sometimes there are some misconceptions. One of them is related to the length of the events. So for the events to be time boxed, it simply means that they should not take longer than, for example, you have a daily scrum that's 15 minutes. It doesn't mean that the meeting has to be 15 minutes. If the development team is done with the meeting in 10 minutes, then the meeting is done. The idea is not to go over that respective time box regardless of the event. The only exception is the sprint itself. The sprint will always have the same duration just to keep the consistency. So the question that I was asked previously was regarding the gap in the events. So the idea of the gaps between events, and especially if you have like a sprint planning meeting, the idea is not to have like days where you have 18 hours of events. The idea from the Scrum perspective is that you do not have gaps in the sense that you do not do anything else between the sprints. You do not start, I don't know, working on the architecture or testing the product or anything like this. So the idea is, of course, if you're in an organization where you are working 8 hours and you at the end of the sprint and you have the sprint review, sprint retrospective, and then you start the next sprint with sprint planning, it's definitely okay to interrupt the meeting if the day is about to end, or to schedule your day in a way that meeting doesn't get interrupted. Now, of course, by having a time box like 8 hours doesn't mean that you start like 8 o'clock in the morning, take no breaks, and continue with this meeting until it's done. That will be not super productive. So definitely do not worry about this in terms of like being so super strict. The idea of gaps is that there are no gaps for any other meeting. So you start a sprint planning today, you reach the end of the day and you continue tomorrow, but do not plan anything else in between. That is generally the main idea.
Hello, can you hear me now,
Hi.
Valentin? Sorry, I was not able to unmute myself. I don't know what was going on.
No problem.
Hi. So first of all, let me say a big thank you to you, Valentin, for the excellent course that you have put together. And coming from my background, I mean, I have practically worked on agile projects for many, many years, but not in the recent last 8 or 9 years. So I had no idea about Scrum. But I think your course was fabulous. It helped me to almost achieve near perfect score. So that's great. Thank you so much for putting such a wonderful course. Now, my question is, I'm actually going in for the next exam. I want to sit for product owner certification. Now, I have already bought your course pack on Udemy. So please tell me would that be something which is sufficient, or are there any other extra materials that you suggest I should refer to? Because I plan to take that exam in this month. And given that most of the the knowledge comes from Scrum Guide, I feel that I should be able to do it quickly, but I still want to know from your experience.
Yeah, so most of the time, the PSM I and the PSPO I exams are quite similar. The PSPO I exam is indeed a bit harder, and it focuses more on the product owner role and more on the product and how does this value optimization work in general. But as you mentioned, the contents, most of the content still comes from the Scrum Guide. So especially if in the PSM exam you had a high score, and I'm pretty sure that you did have a high score because you were super engaged also in the previous webinars and asked a lot of questions, which is something that I definitely recommend. Then the PSPO I exam will not be that hard anymore because you have these basics. Now, of course, there are still a few topics that you need to understand. And one of the differences in terms of learning is also the EBM guide. It's not like super important. You're probably going to get 2 or 3 questions that are related to the EBM guide. And apart from this, the entire course will probably be like a recap of like the Scrum principles and the Scrum ideas and the meetings and everything that still stays the same. But then the questions will have like this different perspective, which makes the exam a bit harder. But otherwise, inside the course, you will find like really everything that is related to this. So there's absolutely no worries about that. So I hope this answers your question. After taking the PSM exam, probably the most important value that you can get from the PSPO course is not like rewatching all the lectures, because in sense the content is more or less similar because it's still based on the Scrum Guide. The way I'm explaining the Daily Scrum for the Scrum Master certification, it's quite similar how I'm explaining it for the Product Owner certification, so that's not changing a lot. But the practice tests can really point you in the right direction in terms of if there's still something about a product owner role that is not super clear yet. Does this answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't started going through that course yet, but I plan to either start today or tomorrow latest, because I had some things to do, finish for work.
Yeah.
But I was just wondering that apart from that course, which because for the PSM, I don't think I referred to anything else other than your course, Valentine, and that was super helpful.
Yeah.
So apart from that, if there's any other thing that you think I should be paying extra attention to, that was my question basically. But I think you have already answered that.
Yeah. No. So the course will be like a very, very short and good recap for you, and I think you'll be able to attempt the PSPO I exam in a very short amount of time. So the preparation after passing the PSM I exam will be considerably shorter. Okay.
Okay, I hope so. Thank you.
Well, good luck, and let me know in the meanwhile if you have any questions.
Sure, I will. Thank you.
Okay. So hopefully I managed to answer all your questions. Thank you, everyone that managed to join live. Especially a big thank you to the ones that were courageous enough and asked a live question. That's super important and very nice of you. I thank you all so much. Without you, this webinar wouldn't have been interesting, valuable, and I really enjoy this interaction with you. I really enjoy understanding where you're coming from. What are you doing with this exam? What are you preparing for? What is your current position? And what are you like thinking when approaching Scrum, approaching Agile in general? So from that point of view, it has always been absolutely amazing having you all here. If you're looking for any of the previous webinars, they are all recorded. You'll find links. There's a separate section inside the course where you will find links to all the previous webinars. Definitely, if you missed one of them, you'll find a timeline so you can jump to like respective questions or that things that are interesting for you. Otherwise, there will be like a lot of hours of recorded content. So I really do not want to waste your time. So this is why everywhere you will find all these timestamps that will lead you in the right direction. But at the same time, I do recommend looking at exam tips, because I had a few webinars in the past where we're discussing like how to approach the exam. what kind of things you should expect, how does the exam work in general. So definitely look at those parts of the webinars. It can really help you a lot. And I know that many of you are really following my advice, are really studying the Scrum Guide. And almost every day I'm being approached with messages saying, hey, I passed the exam with 100% or near 100% score. And honestly, that makes me super happy. And definitely in your preparation time, if there's something that's not clear, get in touch with me. I hope this webinar was helpful. I hope any of the previous webinars were helpful as well. Do check the Q&A section because a lot of students are asking really, really good questions there. If there's anything that you don't know, there's absolutely no problem to ask. Reach out. I'm here to help you. And after you pass the exam, definitely get in touch with me. Let me know how the exam was, if the course was helpful, if there's anything that requires changing or adapting. So that's the main idea. Get in touch with me. I'm a real person. I know you're real persons as well. We're in this together. I'm really here to help you. So let's have the conversation all the time and help each other out. Try to understand how Scrum works. I'm also learning from you a lot, guys. So thank you for that as well. So that's about for the webinar today. See you at another webinar and see you inside the course. Bye-bye.